Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really get straight to what matters in our pretty complex world.
That's right.
And just days ago, something major happened. U.S. bunker buster bombs hit three key Iranian nuclear sites: Fordo, Isfahan, Natanz, on a Saturday.
Yeah, that was big news.
Yeah.
And the reaction was immediate, wasn't it?
Absolutely furious. Iranian lawmakers are now talking openly about pulling out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, maybe by next June. Iran's UN rep didn't hold back either. Said the strikes were proof the NPT is just being used as a, quote, political weapon.
And you can bet others were watching closely, like North Korea.
Oh, definitely.
Their foreign ministry condemned the U.S. operation straight away. And analysts, people like Rachel Min-Young Lee, Jong Lee, they're saying Pyongyang is absolutely taking notes.
Taking notes on what specific, the bombs.
Yeah, especially how effective those bunker busters were against fortified targets. I mean, remember, North Korean experts supposedly helped build some of Iran's nuclear stuff.
Right. That connection.
So it just throws fuel on the fire, raises huge questions about, global stability. It feels like we're stepping into a much trickier world.
Exactly. And these huge global events, they're not happening in a vacuum, are they? They tie right back into what's going on here at home, particularly within American conservatism.
That's a key point.
They're seeing this big shift, right-wing populism, kind of cemented by Donald Trump's 2024 re-election, seems to be the main force now.
Yeah, it's really taken hold.
It's not the conservatism maybe some of us grew up with. They're calling it a new fusionism. It mixes traditional ideas with, like, national conservatism, protectionism.
And often there's this element of distrust towards traditional sources of knowledge, experts, institutions, that kind of thing.
So, okay, from missile strikes shaking up the Middle East to the ground shifting under American politics, that's what we're diving into today.
Connecting those dots.
We want to explore how these huge international moments connect with the changing face of American conservatism. Look at the principles, the shifts, what it means for foreign policy, and, importantly, trust right here at home.
Let's try to give you a clearer picture of what's really going on.
Okay, let's start with the chessboard. Iran. Those recent U.S. strikes, B-2s, bunker busters, last Saturday. A very direct message.
Very direct. And Iran's response was just as direct, wasn't it? Their foreign ministry spokesman, Esmail Baghai, said Tehran would make an appropriate decision about the NPT.
Which sounds like code for potentially leaving.
Well, Newsweek reported that lawmakers like Ibrahim Rezai are seriously looking at NPT withdrawal. And that parallel to North Korea. I mean, they left in January 2003, and their first nuclear test wasn't long after, in 2006.
So leaving the treaty could be a precursor. That's sobering, as you said.
It is.
And isn't there a worry that these strikes might actually push Iran towards getting the bomb instead of stopping them?
That's the paradox, yeah. It's a huge concern. Analysts like Alireza Tagavani are saying exactly that. These kinds of operations, especially if seen as backed by Trump, could actually empower the hardliners in Iran who want nukes. Even Russia's Dmitry Medvedev chimed in, saying he thinks these attacks will just speed up Iran's eventual production of nuclear weapons. So, does the short-term gain outweigh the long-term risk? That's the question.
And North Korea's reaction, you mentioned they're watching. What are the experts saying there?
Well, Bruce Bechtol, who's a former intel officer, thinks the B-2 strikes definitely give North Koreans great pause. Makes them think twice.
Okay, so deterrence is part of it.
Part of it, yes. But Jong Lee, another expert, thinks Kim Jong-un will be poring over the details, like really closely reviewing the damage from those bunker busters.
Learning lessons, maybe.
Exactly. Rachel Min-Young Lee says North Korea is actively drawing lessons about air defense, about attack capabilities. They want to make their own underground nuclear network even tougher.
Wow. So they're adapting based on what they see.
And adding another layer, Scott Snyder points out Kim Jong-un feels stronger now with more solid backing from Russia and China. So he might feel less pressure to talk to the U.S. unless the price is right,
Which brings us back to Trump. His America First approach, especially now after the 2024 win, seems central to this new fusionism in conservatism. How does that change foreign policy thinking?
It's a real shift. That new fusionism emphasizes things like national conservatism, protectionism, and what they call a more realist foreign policy. It's definitely moving away from the old neoconservative playbook.
Neoconservatism being more about intervention, promoting democracy abroad.
Generally, yes. More interventionist, sometimes militarily. Trump's approach, it seems rooted in a more transactional view. focused on immediate political wins.
Like the summits with Kim Jong-un in his first term, the love letters.
Exactly. Or pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, back in 2018. It's about direct deals, often personality-driven, less about long-term alliance management or ideological crusades.
So, projecting forward, a second Trump term and North Korea. What could that look like? Snyder's analysis suggests uncertainty.
Definitely unpredictable. For instance, you have the conservative government in South Korea under Yoon. They'd likely push back hard against any U.S. attempt to restart talks unless North Korea commits to denuclearization upfront.
A different stance than maybe previous South Korean governments.
Very different from the progressive ones who really prioritize dialogue. And there's this underlying worry, too. If the U.S.-South Korea alliance feels shaky under this new dynamic, could South Korea decide it needs its own nuclear deterrent?
That would be a massive change for the region.
Huge. It raises serious questions about non-proliferation across Asia.
Okay, so Trump's approach is definitely shaking things up globally. But to get why this approach is resonating, we need to look inside American conservatism itself. It's changing too, isn't it?
Absolutely. The traditional model, what people sometimes call the three-leg stool from the Reagan era.
Social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, and strong anti-communist foreign policy people all together.
Right. That coalition, that fusionism, was dominant for decades. But that foundation is shifting, fundamentally.
And analysts are saying Trump's 2024 win really cemented right-wing populism as the, quote, dominant faction. So what defines this new fusionism compared to the old stool?
Well, the focus is different. More emphasis on national conservatism, protectionism, culturally conservative issues, and that realist foreign policy we mentioned. It's less about free markets globally, less about interventionism.
And some analyses also point to less positive traits, like a conspiracist subculture or less regard for traditional checks and balances.
Those characteristics are noted in some analyses of this shift, yes. The key takeaway is that the priorities within conservatism seem to have changed quite dramatically. America first means something different now.
Let's dive into one specific debate this creates, North Korea's nukes. It seems like there isn't just one conservative position anymore.
No, definitely not. And that's fascinating. You have some voices like Doug Bando at the American Conservative who are taking a very pragmatic line.
Pragmatic how?
He basically argues, look, it's time to face reality. North Korea is a nuclear power. Trying to stop them from having nukes is, quote, no longer achievable.
So what's a solution?
Arms control. Treat them like we treated the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Make deals to freeze and limit their stockpile. Manage the threat that exists rather than trying to wish it away.
Okay, a kind of realpolitik approach. Deal with the world as it is. But that's not the only view, right? There's a counter-argument from other conservatives.
Oh, absolutely. A major conservative think tank, the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, put out a whole strategy paper on North Korea just this January.
AEI, what's their take?
Well, Nicholas Eberstadt and Joseph Detrani co-authored it. And they still say denuclearization has to be central to U.S. national security. But they argue for a fundamental shift in how we get there.
A fundamental shift away from just sanctions or talks.
Their big idea is a human rights upfront approach. They argue that pushing for the rights and freedoms of ordinary North Koreans is actually the most effective way to ultimately end the nuclear threat.
Kind of like Reagan's approach to the Soviet Union, focusing on human rights.
Exactly the parallel they draw. They also call for active containment and using all tools of statecraft. And they're very clear. Just accepting North Korea as a legitimate nuclear state, that would unleash unintended consequences. They're strongly against that.
So two very different paths being debated within conservatism.
It really shows a core tension, doesn't it? Pragmatic management versus a principled, more transformative approach aimed at changing the regime itself, or at least its behavior, through internal pressure. It's a debate about the soul of conservative foreign policy today.
And this internal debate connects to another trend, doesn't it? Something happening domestically, this growing distrust in traditional institutions.
Yeah, they run in parallel. You hear a lot about the diploma divide.
Meaning
the Republican Party has been making significant gains among white voters without college degrees. And that trend seems linked to the rise of right-wing populism.
Okay. And how does that connect to distrust?
Well, some analysts see a correlation between that demographic shift and what they term conservative anti-intellectualism. Basically, a growing skepticism towards mainstream media, universities, even science sometimes.
Do we have numbers on that? Is it measurable?
Oh, yeah. Exit polls from the 2024 election showed Trump won 56% of voters without a college degree, compared to only 42% of those with one. That gap is pretty stark.
Wow.
And look at confidence in higher education. Gallup found that among Republicans, it plummeted from 56% in 2015 down to just 19% in 2023.
19%. That's a massive drop.
Huge. In less than 10 years. Even among Democrats, it fell, though not nearly as much.
So it's a broader trend, but much sharper on the right. What about science specifically?
We see divides there, too. Data shows conservatives are now substantially more likely than liberals or moderates to reject the consensus on climate change, for example, and also more likely than liberals to hold anti-vaccine views.
Which is interesting because wasn't that different a few decades ago?
Yeah, reports suggest these attitudes were much more similar across the political spectrum up until maybe the 1990s. So it marks a real shift, and it makes you wonder, how does this impact policy debates on things like climate or public health?
And the media landscape, does that play a role in amplifying this skepticism?
Sources definitely point to conservative media outlets playing a significant role. Talk radio, Fox News, they're mentioned as being very influential in shaping opinions and reinforcing skepticism towards those traditional academic and scientific institutions.
This distrust seems to tap into a deeper philosophical argument too, doesn't it? About the nature of truth itself, especially within academia.
It does. You have conservative intellectuals who are really bothered by postmodernism and its focus on moral relativism as they see it.
What's the core disagreement there?
Well, cultural conservatives, as someone like Douglas Kilner describes them, tend to argue for universal truth and absolute standards of right and wrong. That clashes directly with postmodern ideas that often question whether any statement can be an absolute timeless truth. They see truth as more constructed, more relative.
So a fundamental clash over whether objective truth exists or is knowable.
Exactly. Think of someone like Gertrude Himmelfarb, the neoconservative historian. She strongly rejected postmodern approaches to history, calling them a denial of the objectivity of the historian and undermining the very idea of truth. It becomes a debate about radical skepticism versus foundational principles.
So these aren't just academic squabbles, they have real consequences for how people see the world and make decisions. Okay, let's try to bring this all together. What does this mean for you listening right now?
Well, first, those U.S. strikes on Iran, North Korea's reaction, it shows this new fusionist conservatism is actively shaping global events. The consequences are real and, frankly, unpredictable.
And here at home, that shift is mirrored by this growing distrust among many conservative towards institutions like universities, mainstream media, science. It changes how information flows, how debates happen. That old three-leg stool is definitely looking different.
Yeah, it's a profound realignment in American politics. Conservatism itself is changing fast, adapting to these new global pressures and domestic feelings. The implications are pretty huge.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering these big shifts, how does a conservative movement that seems increasingly skeptical of traditional experts and institutions grapple with incredibly complex global challenges? And what does that mean for informed decision-making for all of us in the years ahead?